What are you doing now to ensure that you have a solid legacy?
Well, putting several things in place. My wife and I actually have recently been putting some estate planning, financial plans in place to make sure that, obviously, in the event of something untimely happening, that of course our kids are taken care of, and who's going to take care of them. But then even after that, God willing, we're here for another 100 years. Some point I got to leave this earth, and so just to make sure that we have some insurance things in place, so that nobody's fighting over who's gonna get the couch and who's getting the car when I leave this earth, and all of those things. All of that stuff is in writing. It's taken care of. Money's there, good to go. So I'm trying to just do proactive things now to make sure that there aren't problems later.
Well, that's good. I don't think a lot of people think about what their legacy will be or how to make sure they take care of their family. So make sure y'all attend an estate planning seminar at some point.
Hmm.
At some point, make sure that gets done. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Take a Space podcast. I'm your host, Leah, and this week I am joined by Dr. Shaun Woodly. Thank you for being on the show, Shaun.
Thank you so much, Leah. I appreciate the opportunity to join your platform. I really do. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, so can you tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely, absolutely. As you mentioned, my name is Dr. Shaun Woodley. I am an educator. I am a speaker. I am an author. But first and foremost, I am a husband. I am a father, and not the least of which is a child of God. And so I am someone that just loves to have the opportunity to pour into others. I take a lot of pride and joy in what I am privileged to do, and I do not take that lightly. Being an educator going on now for 15, 16 years, this is hard work, and it's hard work, but I love
Well, I appreciate your service in the education space because everybody can't do it.
it.
Every
Hmm. Right.
everybody is not meant to be a teacher or an educator in any aspect. Just whew.
Hmm.
So I thank you for that. What got you into education?
Well, my story begins with music, actually. I grew up a musician in the church. Started playing around sixth grade. Small family church, and my dad played the organ, and so I just felt it was my time to hop on the drums, and that's what I did. And it was one of those things where I just kind of grew to love the instrument, love playing. And so I just knew that I was going to go on to college and major in music performance, go on tour. You're talking about the 90s then. So I just knew that TLC, Usher, somebody was going to pick me up on tour, and I'm going around the world. That didn't quite happen. So in 11th grade, I want to say, usually around that time, you start filling out college applications, declaring majors, things of that nature. So I was talking to some of my teachers at the time, and they recognized the skills, but they said, just in case you don't get picked up to go on tour right away, give yourself something to fall back on. So why don't you study music, but you can also study education at the same time? I said, all right, it's not
Hmm.
too bad. And so best advice I got. Sure enough, when I stepped on the campus of that university, I went to HBCU, Hampton University, and it was one of those things where everybody was the man or the woman from where they were coming from, and I was the lesser talent as far as drums was concerned, because there were some people there that to this day are nice. One of my friends, good friends, he's on tour with Charlie Wilson right now. Like, that's the caliber of
Hmm.
musicianship that I had to deal with. So I was not there. And so I sat back. I played in the band for a little bit, and got in my education classes, and just went ahead and charged it to the game. But something that was really, really good for me, because when I got into my education classes, I said, okay, I like this. I like the psychology of it. I like the human growth and development side about it. I like understanding a little bit more about me in the process. And of course, with us being relational beings, this is all human to human connection and relationship building. That's all me right there. So I kind of just embraced that a little bit more, got into my student teaching, and then eventually got into a classroom of my own, and began to just grow and develop that way.
So in your education journey, did you start off in what grade level did you start off on? I'll say that. I'll ask that first.
I started off in middle school, so I taught sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, right at that age where they think that they own the world and you can't tell them anything, right around that age.
You're so
And so,
brave. Oh.
yeah, I did it. And the way, honestly, when I graduated college, I did a 5 year program. So I finished my bachelor's degree in 4 years, and then right after that, I went right into a fifth year for a master's degree program. And
Okay.
so coming out of there with 2 degrees in 5 years instead of like six. So, but at the time, I kind of was being led. I had this urge for entrepreneurship. I didn't quite
Mm,
know how, but I was being led to it, but it just didn't present itself to me. So I just thinking, all right, I know a couple of people, a couple of my frat brothers were in the school of business, and then they came back, they're coming back to campus with the corporate cards. I was like, I want a corporate card too. So instead of going straight into teaching, I actually went into the corporate world for a little while. And I started
mm,
working at Wells Fargo, which is what at the time was Wachovia. Worst, it was, oh my, I hated it. I hated it so bad. It was exciting when I first, just because I got a regular income salary and was learning something new. I got to travel a little bit for training. But once that wore off, it was torture every single day.
mm.
And I knew that that was not where I was supposed to be. And so I started making some phone calls, found out about an available position at a school, and come to find out, typically when you apply for education positions, you're supposed to submit your application on the school district website. I circumvented all that. I just started calling people directly. And I called around, had an interview, didn't really work out, called around, then called another school district that was about 20 minutes away. And they said, well, actually, we have an opening because somebody just left. And the rest was history. I got an interview and I went in there, and I was so prepared for that. I just knew that that was my time. I went in there, I had a full suit on. I had on, clean pressed shirt, shoes. I had a briefcase in my hand. Briefcases don't belong in education, but I had one anyway. I was ready to go
Hmm.
in there. And every question that the principal, the assistant principal, and I believe it was a department chair that was in there, I had an answer for. And I let them know in every way that I could that I was the person. They offered me the position, and I began to go in there and just start teaching in a school that was in what some might consider a challenging neighborhood. And it
Mm.
challenged me. I challenged those students, and it was a growing process for us all in those early days. It was rough. I will admit that.
What I'm finding in these conversations is there is, and I can only think of two, maybe,
Hmm.
teachers in my primary, secondary education where I had black male teachers, maybe two.
Hmm. Hmm. Yep.
Only one of them that I was like, oh, he's a pretty good teacher. But
Yeah.
why why do you think, as a black male, not speaking for all black males, but from your
Hmm.
experience, why do you think we have such a lack of representation in that demographic in school?
I can attribute it to a couple of things, not the least of which is when you think about education in its totality. All right,
Mhm.
take education out of the equation for just a second. Let's talk about Black people.
Okay.
Black people, as far as the history of these United States is concerned, statistically and even realistically, have never really had good experiences with systems. Whether you're talking about the criminal justice system, healthcare system, housing system, economic system, education is a system. And so
Hmm.
you're talking about, just with what you said, you're talking about going through 13 years, kindergarten through 12th grade, either not having a lot of experiences with people that look like you, and or those experiences with people that look like you, they're far and few in between, and or the other experiences that you have. I know, I don't want to speak for everyone else, but I'm willing to bet that the experiences that you can have where you can say second grade was a good year, third grade, those are not consistent and far and few in between. What
Right.
ends up happening for a lot of Black people and a lot of Black children in the school system is they end up feeling unheard, undervalued, unseen. And so if I go through 13 years of that, why in
Mm,
the world would I now want to go back and have a career in that? So it's something where some of us, educators, black male educators, we get into it just because it's not, it ends up being, for a lot of us, sometimes we get into it in spite of, not because of, or we
mm.
get into it where we have such a love for science or such a love for math that those experiences don't outweigh the love that you have for the subject matter and the love that you have for the teaching. Do you see what I mean? But it
Yes,
makes it
yes.
it makes it almost a competition where it's just like, I don't know, is the 13-year experience that you had going to outweigh your love for polynomials? It's just down to that
I
sometimes.
can honestly agree with that because
Mhm,
sometimes it can feel that way. It absolutely, and I can look after going through something for 2 or 3 years. You're like, I don't think this
mhm,
is it for me.
yep, yep,
So how so is it? I know that we've talked about on the show previously
mhm,
many times about how representation is so important. How
mhm,
can we ensure that there is space that is created or a space that is elevated for more black men to take part? We just, I mean, and this episode is going to be out way later, but there was a post going around about how there were so many fights going on at a school and kids were getting
mhm,
suspended left and right, but 40 black fathers were like, no, we're going to stop this, we're
mhm,
showing up to the
mhm,
school, and everybody got right real quick. So we understand the impact of having black men present, focused, and making sure that, hey, we're not doing this, we're
mhm.
not getting out of line, we're going to get our education, we're going to get our job done. What can we do in society, or what can society offer to create that space to allow, not even to allow, but to provide the opportunity for black men to be a part of, or is just something that you feel that they should have that's separate?
Both,
Okay.
both can be true. I do know, and that's why so many independent or homeschool, what do they call them? Homeschool clusters, if you will.
Hmm.
Independent schools started for Black and Brown children. That is the purpose of that, is because at the end of the day, what is happening is we're having to fight against a long standing system
Hmm.
that has a lot of power and support behind it. So when we say something is wrong, something needs to be changed, we get a lot of pushback. Think about what the narrative is now around critical race theory.
Yeah.
Something that is, I've never in my professional career seen something so conflated and misused and misrepresented for the sake of avoiding teaching actual history.
Right.
It's phenomenal to the point where all of these policies, all of these politicians are getting involved and creating these things. Governors are sanctioning, they're sanctioning the teaching of critical race theory for something that's not even taught in K-12 schools. It's a law school theory that is discussed in law school after undergraduate college, has no place in the classroom of a 7-year-old. So people are just using that as a mask to cover up teaching actual history.
Hmm.
But how? But those that don't know history are doomed to repeat it.
Very true.
And what I find very interesting a lot of times is that the argument behind, let's just call it what it is, teaching actual history can leave some people feeling guilty about the sins of the past. But what I find very interesting about that same argument is on the other side of that, when you have people that say, I feel unheard, I feel unseen, we're we're scoffed at. When you have black women that get in trouble for wearing their hair naturally, or just people, let me touch it, and they're almost in the workplace shunned and looked at funny just because you won't let somebody touch your hair and play with your hair like you're some sort of animal or something like that. And
Right.
all these things, I feel uncomfortable. I don't want you to do that. It doesn't make me feel good. And then it's like, well, toughen up, or you have conversations like that. So on one hand, it's okay for someone not to feel good, but on the other hand, it is, and you create all these policies and everything. It's really imbalanced, and it all goes back to the whole reason why they don't want the history being taught. There's a power structure in place. It's rooted in systemic racism. And the hard thing about it is that racism is an ever evolving system. It is not just a one time event, it's not one thing, it's an ever evolving system. And it's a power structure that is in play and you can't see it. That's what sucks about it. But every time we try to do something, every time we get one step forward, the goalposts move. It makes it really, really difficult. So to answer your question, it really has to start with a lot of systemic changes to make the education experience more pleasurable and enjoyable for students throughout the entire K-12 process.
Hmm.
It's a lot to ask, but it shouldn't be.
Do you think we are trending toward that kind of space in any aspect in
Sort of,
education?
sort of. There
Tell me
there
about it.
has been a little more, a lot more discussion. We've lived as Black people microaggressions, racism, and everything in between, probably all our lives in some way, shape, or form.
Hmm.
The recent events, semi-recent events of George Floyd, Sandra Bland, Philando Castillo, all of these things that have hit the media, and especially the ones that occurred during the pandemic when we were inside and forced to be in front of this media happening more
Right.
regularly. Now it's becoming more of a recent phenomenon. Like, oh my goodness, this is happening. Mind you, we've been living this. We've been trying to tell y'all for however long this is happening, but now everybody's seeing it. So now you have these DEI initiatives and committees, and which is great. So to answer your question, I think that the tide is beginning to change on some of this. You have a lot of resistance on the other side of that, but you have some really, really awesome people on both. You have some really awesome people, Black, white, in between, who are behind it, who understand the importance of it, who support it,
Mhm.
and who speak out about
So, in your experience,
it.
in with your background, do you believe that critical race theory, or not even critical race theory, but a version of such, which
Hmm.
is essentially just teaching history as it is and how
Correct.
structures in the United States came to be?
Hmm.
Because the argument is we're either teaching racism or it's too complex for K-12 students to understand.
Hmm.
Do you believe that there is a space for that type of conversation to happen, or that type of teaching to happen in the K-12 space? Or is it
It
something
has
that
to.
should be, because for me, it happened in college. If
Hmm.
my
Hmm.
dad and the community I was a part of wasn't going to Marcus Bookstore in Oakland to get
Hmm.
books on what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, what happened with the many fires in Tulsa wasn't an isolated incident,
Hmm.
knowing what happened, what the years of the aggression just being overt to now being
Hmm.
covert,
Hmm.
and how those things manifested themselves. If we're not privileged in that type of environment, I would have never known before
Yeah.
college.
Yep.
So do you feel that that K-12 has a space for learning the actual history, or is that too complex for those students?
It's not too complex. It's we teach complex. We teach simplified complex. We teach simplified versions of complex concepts every single day. I think I
Absolutely.
said that right. And so it's not, because we talk about the Great Depression. We talk, and that's a complex economic disaster, and everything that happened from one domino that fell to the last. And so we teach that. So why is it that we can't teach actual history even in its simplified version? So to answer your
Mm.
question, it can happen. It's really, the underlying question is, do we want it to? Not we, but do they want it to happen? That's
Right.
what the question is.
So, as we talk about having more open conversations and we have
Hmm.
these, which I'm going to get to social media in a bit, but as we start having more open discussions, and I'm feeling based on social media and the people who I have conversations with, they are, especially the Black, Indigenous, and people of color, are being more
Hmm.
honest about what they feel and where they are in education.
Hmm.
How is it, or how can we take those feelings or those thoughts or those experiences, bring them to the forefront to change for the next generation?
What I appreciate about the openness of a lot of the conversations that have happened recently is that it is bringing awareness to a lot of people who just honestly may not have even known. Like for some, I really think, especially, okay, I'm going in a slightly different direction, but I'm gonna bring it back.
Okay.
The school systems right now, just like housing, are some of the most segregated portions, legally segregated portions of structures in these United States.
Hmm.
And so there are a lot of people who I've had conversations with who, white people, they go through, and the only thing that they know about Black people is what they see on TV,
Right.
or is what they might be taught, because there are not every school system celebrates Hispanic Heritage Month in September, Black History Month, or Indigenous Peoples. Not every school system celebrates that. And so if you have a child or a group of children who go throughout their entire life, their entire K-12 career, not having that exposure, how would they know about those things?
Right.
And so on one hand, it's a level of, what's the word that I want to use? I don't want to say ignorance, because that's a little harsh, but it's just lack of exposure. So on the other, so you can't fight against something at the end of the day you're not even aware is happening, truthfully.
Right.
But then when you are exposed, when you do become aware, now we have to make a decision, because now we get into this space where inaction technically is action. Because when you know that something is wrong and you choose not to do something about it, you in you're not making a decision, you've made a decision. And
Hmm.
so being in this space as educators, and as I mentioned before, with some of the more recent events highlighting some of the inequities in all of the systems, but particularly in education, it's allowing space for more people to share their story. It's allowing space for more people to come forward and say, this happened to me, this was not right. Wow, I didn't realize this was happening. How can I help?
Now we got to the help aspect of it, because I want to just encourage people, keep telling your story.
Hmm.
Don't live
Hmm.
in the pain. For the love of God, please do not live in the pain, but keep actually telling your story, because there are people who you can connect with to help. As
Hmm.
we start expressing more of our story, especially what I see on social media, people get stuck in these echo chambers
Hmm.
where they keep spitting out and taking in the same information in a cycle all day every day, just the same thing over and over again, until it becomes a part of their narrative, their story.
Yeah.
How
Hmm.
can we, in the education space, break out of, how can we learn to educate ourselves to break out of that echo chamber?
It's hard because we naturally just repeat back things that we hear and are told to us. And a lot of times we go into this, like that whole fake news thing, we go
Right.
into just spreading false narratives just because we heard someone else say it, or just because we read it, without checking any sort of reliability or validity of what is being said. So
Hmm.
we have to be sure that we are fact checking our sources in these things. Like as a researcher, I know to do that, but I have to understand the curse of knowledge and understand that everyone doesn't think the way that I do. So I have to think
Right.
the way that they might think. Not that they're purposefully doing that, but they just don't process information the same way that I've been trained to. And so it's a
Ah.
matter of exposure. It's a matter of saying, well, okay, I see what you're saying there, and I see maybe where you might have gotten this from, but did you realize that this is not really true? It's not really accurate, because if you look over here at a more reliable source, you will find out X, Y, and Z.
So now we're talking about critical thinking, and
Hmm.
which is a skill that you really have to use. And I feel like that's more taught, unfortunately, at the higher ed level. I haven't really experienced that in my education space in the K-12.
Hmm.
Is there, oh, let's see how I want to ask this question. Um, because critical thinking is, to me, it makes sense. You want to, like, not just question everything, but learn how to apply what you've learned, know where to
Hmm.
compartmentalize it, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
sometimes it frustrates me when people just take in and regurgitate news from a source, but it's not verified by anything else.
Yeah.
So I really do try. I tell myself that people don't have that skill like I have it. Like I practice that. I
Hmm.
do that. That's what happens
Yes.
in debate. You question everything. But
Yes.
aside from telling somebody to take a debate class or to take
Hmm.
a critical thinking speech course or writing course that's going to force them to write out and analyze their thoughts,
Hmm.
what are some ways in the education space that teachers may be able to incorporate critical thinking, regardless of topic, in their classrooms?
I'll give you a good example of a colleague of mine who I met in this social media space. Awesome educator, an awesome pair of educators. They wrote a book called Unpack Your Impact, and they teach kindergarten, if I'm not mistaken.
What's
And
their
one
name?
of the things, Lanisha Tab and Naomi, I forget Naomi's last name. It's I can Naomi O'Brien. And they wrote an awesome book, and they teach at the kindergarten level what one might consider critical thinking, because here's what they do. They have, I'll give you an example. This isn't something that I saw them do, but it made me think about it. All right. One of the stories that we're taught, spread white privilege so early, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. If you really think about Goldilocks and the Three Bears, that's got privilege dripping up and down.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
what they might do in that instance is they might read that story to their children so that they can have some context and go all the way through, and then they'll go back and they'll say, wow, boys and girls, well, look at this. We have someone that has walked into someone's house. Is that her house? Does she belong there? No. And well, she went and took something that wasn't hers. Should she have done that? And then they'll elevate it. Let's see
Mm.
what would have happened if, and she's getting them to think about if then scenarios instead of just regurgitating, what's her name? How many bears were there? Was the porridge too hot, cold, or just right? Like, she's getting them, they're getting them to think at a higher level instead of just the lower level of Bloom's taxonomy and just the reciting. Now we're kind of, I haven't memorized the whole thing, but basically going up levels of Bloom's taxonomy to process information in a different way to get them to think about it from different perspectives. And what I
Mm.
did see them do, which was really, really good, is they were sharing, I can't remember the exact lesson, but they had the students question, from whose perspective do you think this story is being told? Because what they were trying to get them to understand is that that story was being told from a white perspective.
Mm.
So whose voice is being left out? Hmm. Like simple, complex ideas being simplified like that
Right.
for kindergartners. So
Yeah.
you have educators, when you know what you're doing, they get it done. But there is a level of willful ignorance that exists where, you know what, I got this lesson, I'm going to teach it just the way that it is here, and I'm not going to try and take my own thinking to another level so that I can take my students thinking to another level. Unfortunately, that exists as well. Excuse me.
I know. And it's sad.
Yeah.
It really is sad when the lesson plan is just 2D flat on the paper. Like you just this is how it is. Read the book, take the test,
Hmm.
and that's it. Can you regurgitate out what you read? That's
Yep.
that's some of the years that I was in school. That's what it was like. I can
And you
probably
can tell.
remember like fifth grade, seventh grade, and probably my freshman year in high school were probably the only years where I was actually challenged in my
See,
courses.
see.
In my K-12 experience was the only times that I was challenged. So since we know that there's a gap,
Hmm.
and unfortunately there sometimes creates this how do I want to call it? How do I want to? Okay, I'll explain it like this. So since there's a lot of teachers whose lessons just stay 2D, right?
Hmm.
So there are things that stay on the floor. We don't think any higher than what's on the floor. Whatever we see in front of us, that's what it is. No discovery, no investigation, no anything. How
Hmm.
can parents empower their students if they may not have a background in education, but they know my kid is getting really bored with the homework. They're getting really
Hmm.
bored in class. I really want to challenge my kid, but I may not have a what is it, a boys and girls club or
Okay.
a chess team or something in my area that my kid can go to. So how can those type of parents challenge their students to make sure that they stay engaged educationally?
In school or at home?
We'll do at home first and then we'll talk about in school.
Okay. It starts with understanding your child and who your child is and how they process information, their personality type. Understanding, like, yes, that may be your child, but do you understand what it is that they enjoy and what it is that they enjoy learning about? Creating a love for learning for that child at home will reinforce what happens at school. And also, creating that love for learning at home and also teaching the core factors of just emotional intelligence will help that child when they're in difficult circumstances. And when I mean difficult circumstances, I mean like boredom sets in. And now, where a lot of kids get in trouble, to be honest with you, is because they're not engaged the right way. And
That
so
was
they're
me.
left to their own imagination. But what happens is that manifests itself differently for everybody. For some, it could just sit there and just be a bump on the log. For some, I need to move because I'm not being engaged with this learning, and so I'm spinning around in circles. Or like me, I'm tapping like this. All of these habits that we have. For some, they're going to entertain. I need to do something. My brain needs to be engaged. I like to laugh and joke, so I'm cracking these jokes in the middle of class. But it all goes back to a lack of engagement, because when you have students that are engaged and they want to be in that learning environment, you don't have those issues. You significantly minimize them. Many,
Mm,
many, 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 many of the issues can be traced back to a lack of engagement. So what that parent can do at home is really help that child develop their levels of self-awareness and their self-management to manage themselves emotionally. And when they get in those difficult circumstances, those regulation tactics can come into play so that they can say, all right, clearly on board. Let me just get through these next couple of minutes, and then we have an activity that we're going to do. So, before, just having that level of awareness, even at a young age, and again, another complex idea that can be simplified. So, having that level of awareness, even at a young age, can help tremendously.
so what does that conversation sound like? If a kid is at home and a parent knows that, hey, did you do your homework? This is night 3 that you
Hmm.
haven't done your multiplication. What are some questions that the parent can ask to see whether or not the student is losing interest in school, or if they're not wanting to be engaged, or whatever the case may be? What are some questions that or some things that can happen that will spur a conversation to get to the bottom of it?
Hmm. It that can vary a lot from child to child because it really just depends. But one of the things that we tend to do as parents is, how was school today? Do you have any homework? And maybe one or two more, but it really stops right there. And what we have to do is kind of interrupt that cycle. What made you really think today in school?
Hmm.
Was there anything that challenged you? Was there anything? How did you help someone else today at school? Did something make you upset? What did the teacher do that caused you to think differently today? Just getting them to reflect, but because it's so easy with the type of questions that we ask, it's
Hmm.
so easy to just say, "Oh, it was a good day. Everything was good. You have any homework? No, I already did it." Lying, those types of things, and just interrupting those traditional thought patterns, and then also establishing certain habits. For example, organization can be, like we used to get those planners. Remember, did I used to get them planners? Like the school used to
Hmm.
hand you those little planners back in the day.
Yes.
I don't know if they still do that, but like getting your child a planner and making sure that like they have everything online now, and it's crazy. But actually putting pen to paper and writing down the assignments that you have, whether it's one, whether it's two, whether it's nothing, but just getting in the habit of tracking what it is that you have to do and making that be a part of your nightly routine. Hey, mom, I just wanted to show you my planner. I had this and I checked it off and got it done. Those types of things. So you have certain levels of accountability. But interrupting those typical after school questions can definitely be a start to that.
So building that self-awareness and that reflection and making the child think outside of it was good, it was fine. I learned something, I
Hmm.
guess. I think we learned double digit addition,
Hmm.
getting outside of that and helping them to see past the lower level of learning and trying to elevate what they're thinking. How can that translate in school when a parent needs to, because until a child learns how to advocate for themselves, the parent
Yeah.
is their advocate. That's their
Hmm.
mouthpiece. So how can
hmm
a parent when in the school advocate for their child?
Well, here's the thing. And even with that whole idea of advocacy, that's not going to work for every single child because you have to have that type of not I'm saying outspoken, but I don't mean it in a defiant way. I just mean literally simply advocating for self. Not
Mhm.
everyone is comfortable. There are adults that are not comfortable speaking up for themselves. So you
I've
can
talked
only
to some,
imagine,
yes.
what it is for children that are they don't operate well in that space. And
Hmm.
so really what you have to do is you have to make sure that you understand who it is that you are serving, whether it is from the teacher side or the parent side. A lot of times what we do is we treat people the way that we want to be treated. I know that I can advocate for myself, so therefore, it is my expectation that my son and my daughter they advocate for themselves too. Well, what if that's not how they process information? What if that's not just naturally how they communicate?
Hmm.
I therefore shouldn't expect them to communicate the same way I do. I shouldn't treat them the way that I want to be treated. I have to treat them the way they want to be treated. And
Right,
so that
right.
might mean communicating in a different way. That might mean being a little more reserved, being a little more strategic. But it starts with just understanding who it is, whether you're the parent or whether you're the teacher, because that can go both ways.
So as a parent, if I know that my child is not as engaged as they should be in their education, or
Hmm.
there's like I know there are some parents who, especially, we've talked about this a couple different times, how the classroom has changed a lot since coming back from the pandemic because students
Hmm.
are now out of their um, they didn't have a year and a half of having to sit at a desk and listen to the teacher. They've been
Hmm.
at home on the couch, in bed,
Yeah.
doing whatever it
Hmm.
is that they want to do. So the structure, a lot of that is gone. So the
Hmm.
compliance, the discipline of sitting down, a lot of teachers are like, yeah, that's pretty much out the door. We have to
Hmm.
talk about emotional intelligence. We have to talk about uh, disruptive behavior, all that kind of conversation. That's more of a conversation than it has been previously. But if a child is really not engaged because of the material or the teacher or whatever else is going on in the education sphere,
Hmm.
that I mean, I know there's the PTA, but not every parent
Hmm.
can be a part of the PTA. So,
Hmm.
what are some other ways, even if it's not going up to the school and giving the principal a piece of your mind? What are some
Hmm.
other ways that could positively um, communicate the information to the teacher or the school officials? Hey, I really want my child to be engaged, and I'm finding that they're having some issues. Can we have can we have that kind of conversation?
That's a difficult one because what that does now is it calls into question. Like if I'm a teacher and you coming to me like that, I'm gonna I might feel some type of way about that because I feel like you're calling into question my skill as an educator, and
Mm,
you don't know what I'm dealing with in here. So that can be a difficult one. What I would say to that, however, is it all starts with relationships.
okay.
We are relational beings by nature. If especially, I'll put myself in that teacher's position. If the first time and the only time that I hear from a parent is when you don't like something, when something's wrong, I don't want to hear nothing you got to say. Who would?
Right,
The
right.
only time that you communicate with me is if you want to complain or tell me about what I'm doing wrong, forget you. And you might be coming from the right place, advocating for your child and saying, I really would like some more ways for little Trayvon to be engaged in you heart in the right place, but you have to think from the other side of that. What
Right.
perspective is that other person coming from? With us being again, we thrive off of connection. That's a survival skill that is just a part of our human nature. And so if there's no connection that exists, but now you're trying to ask me for something, you don't have a lot of ground to stand upon. So if there is a way to establish connection and a relationship with that teacher from day one, and I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Lil Traymon's mommy. I just wanted to, let you know that I'm here to help. I can ever ask any questions. You have room, mom? Can I help with anything? Those types of things. Let's start that from the outset. And it doesn't the school beginning of the school year is gone. What can you do today, tomorrow, to offer some support so that now when you do need to call in that favor, you have some emotional equity upon which you can draw.
Mm. Because that's what I'm hearing a lot of, is that there are parents who are, I didn't know parents simply checked out personally.
Hmm.
I'm not a parent myself, but I didn't know that there were parents until I started doing the series, that there are parents that were simply just like, whatever happens at school, your problem. What happens at home, I deal with.
Yeah.
And or some parents who are just like, they don't connect with the teacher, period.
Hmm.
So I was like, but how do you know how your child is doing? Like, what do you
It's it's
you
it's one of those things. It's real crazy, Leah, because there are a lot of different levels to it. Because from the parent side, I'm trying to survive right now. I got this. I got to keep food on the table. I got when I go to work, employment is down because people are tired of dealing with foolishness, but I can't quit. I have to be here. So now I have to make up for someone else's job that I have to cover for that I can't.
right.
I'm only one person, but now I have to do the role of three people. So then when I get home, what I don't feel like doing, because I have to cook, I have to clean, I have to make sure that everybody's washed and bathed. What I don't feel like doing is now having to go and do extra things that I already don't have time for. So what I have to do in a sense is put my trust that everything that is happening in that classroom is for the benefit of my child because I just don't have mental space to deal with anything else. But then from the
Mm,
teacher side, what they're dealing with is they're dealing with colleagues who are overworked and underpaid. They're also dealing with colleagues who have left the classroom. So now we have extra students in my classroom where I already had 27. Now I got 35, and I got people that are in and out of my classroom all day, and I'm still being evaluated with some sort of system that is not equitable. I still have, all the underlying issues that have been in education on top of everything that is happening now. And then I haven't even got home yet. I still got to do the same thing when I get home. I got to cook, make sure I clean, this, take care. I got to be a husband. I got to be a wife. All this, that, and the third. So it's happening on both sides. And so I think if everyone just took a moment to just understand and try to understand where the other person is coming from and be
mhm.
a little more empathetic, it could alleviate some of that.
Okay. So what it sounds like is that conversation before we even get to the, hey, my child, this is the third time you contacted me about my child's behavior, or he's not engaged in the homework or anything like that. Before that even happens, before it even gets to that part, is more of a more of a building of the relationship, to so that you actually know who I am as the teacher. Oh, I am the parent of so and so.
That's it. Because in those instances, I know there were plenty of times where me as a teacher, or even heck, me in school, I I had some teachers that would know my mother by the first name. It was, do I need to call Monica? Like, and no, ma'am. And I straightened right up because they had that relate. Like, my mom didn't play them games. My mom told me, if I have to get up, if I have to leave my job and come up to that school, you're gonna be sorry. And my mom knew who my teachers were. She connected, especially in those earlier years. She
Mm-hmm.
connected with them and made sure that she maintained a relationship with them because she understood the value of education. And more importantly, my mom had high expectations for me, and she had higher expectations for that teacher. So it just, I saw that, and I, at the time, obviously I didn't realize the value of it. Moreover, did I realize that there are other kids that don't have that. On top of that, that relationship has changed. Now you're talking about, this is 30, 35 years ago. Now it's that parent teacher dynamic has shifted dramatically. It
Yes.
dramatically. And so there's a lot at play here. There really, really is. But you do still have those educators, the vast majority of educators that I wholeheartedly believe that are in these classrooms want the best for their students. They really, really do. Some just don't know how. Some just don't have the strength to do the best that they can for themselves, let alone their students, with everything that they're dealing with. And some just are trying to swim upstream in a broken system every single day, and it's just taking a lot out of
That can be hard too, dealing with teacher, because you don't know which teacher. I mean, you can probably, if you go up to the school, I don't know, you can with COVID, but seeing the teachers who are burned out or on the verge of burnout,
it.
is it's tough, because
Yeah.
a lot of us have been in that space where,
Mhm.
regardless of what job we're working with, but now we're responsible for a lot of somebody's children,
Mhm. Mhm.
and having that pressure. We're still human.
Yep.
Even though we're educators, we're still human. We
That's
still
it.
have different things that we have going on, like you said, day in a life. We still have a lot going on. But I hope that as the year progresses, as we start hopefully socially cooling down, we can start understanding and communicating with each other as people, not just, oh, you left this, or you write this, or you're conservative,
Mhm.
you're liberal, or you're on what side, or you're this side, oh, you infidel. Like, instead of having those types of conversations, are we having child focused education?
That's it.
Can
That's
we
it.
focus on that? Can we do that?
That's why I
Really?
really go so hard with the Teach Hustle Inspire movement, because, like, what the purpose of it, what it is each of the words, like, they have significance. So the teach is about unlocking intellectual treasure. And it's really about creating a learning environment to get our students from where they are to where they need to be. How can we create that highly engaging instruction so that we avoid those students who manifest disengagement in a number of ways? The
Mm.
hustle part is about how we can't stop learning and we won't stop learning, and the continual growth. How is it that I can learn to become a more engaging educator? How is it that I can learn to become more self aware and continue to move forward in my own learning so that I can continue to move my students forward? And that inspire part, that's the bedrock to it all. It's spreading love and light. We, especially with everything that we have to deal with inside and outside of the classroom, it's that spreading love and light, that connection, that human to human connection is so important. And we have to respect that. We have to honor that.
I can agree with that, honestly. And that's one thing that honestly drove me to your page. I was looking for different educators in the space, and I really like seeing what you were doing. Not just the because some people posture a lot on social media, and I'm like, no, I want to see actual work.
Hmm.
What is it that you're doing in the community? How are you advocating for yourself? How are you advocating for your community? Can people point to you as a leader, and you're not
Hmm.
leading them off of a cliff?
Hmm.
And unfortunately, there's not a lot. At least not in the spaces that I've seen, I've been in. There's not a lot of people who look like us in those types of spaces. So I can appreciate someone who has started this life to try to inspire, try to teach, try to
Thank
help,
you.
even if it is just one person at a time, and stop trying to change the entire world, because you can't do that without making those connections with other people
That's
and
it.
have those hearts change. And then as they
That's it.
change, their community changes. So I would love for you to tell the people more about Teach Hustle, Inspire. What services you offer, the type of how they can get in contact with you if they want you to come speak at their event, the materials that you're able to provide, or anything else you have going on.
Sure, sure. Teach Hustle Inspire, basically, it's an educator movement. I started it to galvanize those who serve in schools and communities that are underserved, undervalued, and underloved. They have so many challenges that can wear against us, and we have to have. I created this as a beacon for us to say, all right, how can we collectively, because we is greater than me, how can we address this and strengthen one another so that we can get these babies, our babies, from where they are to where they need to be. And so the services that I offer to support that, depending on I work with a lot of different schools and organizations across the country, and they have varying needs. Um, Anything from conferences and organizational keynotes and seminars, to school-based workshops, and even some consulting work where I might even have a conversation with some of the administrators, and they can voice some of the challenges that they may have and work with some of the teachers one on one. I have a lot of different packages where, to help, especially at the school level, what I'll do is I'll come in and facilitate a workshop. And because of the connection, I'm very relationship heavy, and I like to establish relationships and connections with my clients. And so what I'll do is I'll create packages where I'll do a workshop for the entire faculty and staff, and they either many times come out with a book, the book that I wrote, or t-shirts for everyone that has the Teach Hustle Inspire logo on that, so that now we can collectively become a part of this work and make sure that what we just learned in this workshop doesn't stop and won't stop. I also offer like supplemental programs and things, because you can have a keynote, you can have a workshop session, and I throw a lot at them. We're engaged, we're having a good time, but I'm throwing these facts at you, and it can be a lot. And so what I want to make sure that I have something is for teachers on the back end to say, all right, let's go through this step by step. Is there a workbook? Are there some modules? Yes, there are. Yes, there is. I got you covered. And so it's just, like I said, it varies from school to school, from district to district, and organization to organization. But I have pretty much a little bit of something for everybody. And again, my focus, typically, a lot of the schools that I work with are in urban and culturally diverse communities.
Okay. What's the name of your book? You said you were an author
It's
and you
called
wrote.
MC Means Move the Class. It's a play on Eric B. and Rakim's means Move the Crowd. Yeah, and how to spark engagement and motivation in urban and culturally diverse schools.
That's two books I need to get. Thank you so much for being on the show. If you have anything that you would like to plug, now is your time to plug away. If you have new events coming up, book signings, or anything else that you have, courses that you're offering, things that people can, what if a person says, well, I can't attend, but I want to donate. If they want to
Hmm.
do that, like, where can they reach you?
Sure. All of the information can be found at teachhustleinspire.com. There are various facets to Teach Hustle Inspire. I have merchandise, I have the books, I have the speaking engagements and workshops, I have the courses and program for individual work, but everything can be found there, on all forms of social media. Usually the hashtag Teach Hustle Inspire will take you right to me, or at Teach Hustle Inspire.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Shaun. I have enjoyed this conversation. It was very enlightening, and it one thing I would hope that people would get from this episode is that they understand the importance of the relationship, the parent-child relationship, teacher-child relationship, but also the parent-school relationship, so
Yes.
that everybody knows we're working to make sure that this child has their best chance. Not that they
That's it.
turn out a cookie cutter version of whomever else, but the child has the right exposure to spark inspiration so that they can start pushing toward what they want and what they need,
Hmm.
and while dealing with all the other stuff that can be piled on top of that. But that's what I really hope that, any educators, any parents out there, make sure you reach out to Shaun, ask him your questions. And it was really easy to get in contact with you. I just want to put that out there. Some people think, oh, he's got a lot going on. No, it was very, very easy. He got back to me pretty quickly. Just reach out with your questions. If you need any resources, he's a good resource. Make sure you go to teachhustleinspire.com, and then find him on all social media. Give him a follow. His stuff is very inspirational, and it makes you want to go out in the community and actually do something to help someone. And even if it's just that one thing that week, hey, you are doing better than a lot of others. Okay. Thank you so much
That's
for
it.
tuning into the episode. Thank you so much to Shaun. Make sure you follow us at Take Up Space Pod. That's Take Up Space POD on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then make sure to follow us on YouTube as well at Take Up Space Pod. Thank you so much for everybody tuning in. You all have a great one.